And to give us an expert's view on the elections, Professor Robert Kelly from Busan National University is joining us. Thanks so much for making the time for us tonight. It may still be too early on in the tally, but how are you reading the voter sentiment from the polling results so far?
Sure. So far, the elections in the southern part of the country, in the southwest and the southeast, have gone pretty much according to expectation. I think maybe the most interesting race that we've seen so far would be the Busan mayoralty. I live in Busan, where traditionally this is Saenuri country. This is the kind of area where conservative candidates should do pretty well. And the independent candidate here in Busan has actually given the Saenuri candidate a run for his money. So I think that's important. That may reflect the unhappiness over Sewol. They may have depressed some conservative turnout or driven people to other candidates. I think the more important issue where we still really don't know where, maybe again we're seeing the Sewol effect is in the northern provinces of South Korea, where all the races are really still up in the air. And this may be like I said, the impact of the ferry, where people are really undecided and people are voting for independent voters and people really aren't coming out and turning out for the government party. So, right now, the areas sort of in the south that we kind of expected, those have more or less fallen the way we expected them to. It's really in the northern part of the country where things are really up in the air.
Right, and we've been seeing the ruling party being shaken a bit from a lot of its strongholds and its positions. What would the scenario be like if the ruling party did lose this time around? How would that affect President Park's presidency moving forward?
Sure. I think there are two sort of important things. The first is that it will congeal, I think, as your reporter appropriately mentioned, it will help congeal the opposition party, the new Alliance for Democracy Party, whatever it is, right? It's only a couple months old and it's still sort of coming together. An Chol-soo is sort of an outside character. We don't quite know how he's going to fit into things. He kind of flamed out a couple of years ago, but now he's back, right? So the NPAD, right, it really needs to come together. It really needs to sort of show that it's a coherent force, that it's not just sort of the Democratic Party repackaged and the rest of it. So if they win tonight, this is big for them. It's a big step, and then they can push the president and the national level much harder. I think that's the first issue. The second issue is that in the National Assembly, the left-wing opposition seat holders in the National Assembly will feel much emboldened by this. They will feel stronger, and they will fight Park's legislation and other things coming through the National Assembly much harder. This will be seen as sort of like a test, as like a bellwether of Korean opinion on her presidency. And if Park's party goes down tonight, then it's going to reinvigorate opposition in the National Assembly.
But the fact that we have so many contested regions so far shows the main opposition party may not be the obvious alternative for many people either. So what does it say about Korean voters and political parties of today?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Korea is how many independent candidates there are floating around. Like I said, in the case of Busan, where I live, the primary opponent to the Saenuri candidate is independent, right? He's sort of a non-party character, sort of represents himself as like a local boy and like a technocrat and things like that. That's actually one of the interesting things about Korea. What it does tell us, I think, from a political science point of view, is that Korea's political parties are still finding their way. They're still not really deeply rooted in civil society. They still don't have like a lot of resonance with the population. The parties here change their names a lot, and people sort of move in and out of different parties and stuff. And that's, I think, partially a reflection of the fact that Korean democracy is young. It's only 30 years or so, right? And it's also because I think ideology doesn't quite play such a big role in Korean parties. Personality plays a big role. We saw that in the contest between Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye in the past. We see that now with the role of An Chol-soo, where he's sort of like this big character who's kind of popped out of nowhere, right? And so as Korea's parties become more institutionalized over time, the role of personality will fade and this sort of party flip-flopping and the name changing will cease. But for right now, I think you're correct. I mean, South Korea's liberal opposition party doesn't really suck up all the non-government votes because there are a lot of independents running around.
Now, concentrating on the fact that we have so many tight races in so many regions, what happens tomorrow or the rest of the year or for the rest of the President Park's presidency? How do you think the parties are going to take this division in voters and react?
Sure. I think the most important thing we need to learn in the next few days, and we just can't figure this out tonight, is how much Sewol impacted people's voting choices. Right? A couple of weeks ago in the media, I mean, people were saying Park Geun-hye should resign, people on the left and stuff like that. I mean, it was a really big deal. It was all over the place. She had to give the big speech and everything. And I think a lot of people expected that tonight there was going to be like this sort of Sewol wave that was going to push conservative candidates out across the country. That doesn't seem to be materializing yet, so Park may have gotten lucky. But we need to find out in the next week or so why people voted. And if Sewol really impacted the vote, if Sewol turns out to have moved the votes maybe 5 or 10%, then people are going to really start to demand that Park Geun-hye govern differently. I think that she might be, people might suggest that she should bring some opposition people into the government. I've heard that suggestion thrown around, that she might have to put more technocrats into her cabinet and staff rather than her friends and the people that she knows well. Right, a lot of it depends on how Sewol shakes out and whether or not the opposition can say, look, we won because of this tragedy and you need to change. And we just don't know that yet. It's going to take another 2 weeks for that to shake out. But like I said, we all expected that to happen, so I still think it's in the cards.
All right, Professor Kelly, we certainly look forward to hearing your thoughts in 2 weeks after all of this has been juggled around. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Sure, thank you very much.